Hey all, WebCamParrot here to talk about one of the most convoluted characters I have ever covered in a video, the Time Trapper. All the way from the Silver Age to his last appearance in Convergence, I'll be covering every comic that the Time Trapper has had a major appearance in. Time Trapper's first appearance is actually, quite bizarrely, in Wonder Woman Volume 1 from 1958, where he was known as the Time Master. It would later be clarified that this was the Time Trapper by Wonder Woman herself. In this storyline, he would place Wonder Woman within a sort of time trap, forcing her to relive certain errors in order to counteract his actions throughout time. He would next appear, this time actually being called the Time Trapper, in Adventure Comics 317-338 in 1964. Having already committed a crime, the Legion of Superheroes attempts to apprehend the Time Trapper using their own time travel technology. However, they find themselves unable to do so because of the Time Trapper's Iron Curtain of Time, preventing them from reaching him. The Legion briefly discuss using a forbidden weapon known as the Concentrator, but warn against even talking about it lest the Time Trapper discover its existence and attempt to use it against them, with the Time Trapper referred to as the Legion's greatest threat. Seemingly coincidentally, the Legion would find themselves under the observation of the Science Police, who wanted to know how this concentrator operated. This representative would interrogate them in order to discover how it worked, with the Legion being unwilling to give away the secrets of the device. It would later be revealed that this Science Police officer was the Time Trapper in disguise all along. After realizing that they had lied to him, Time Trapper would launch a barrage of dead stars at the Legion. The Legion would then use the Concentrator, which concentrates all the power of the universe into a beam, which then destroys the dead stars, with them vowing to one day stop the Time Trapper. Later, Time Trapper meets with Glorith at the end of time, planning to use a special hourglass to de-age the Legion, thereby defeating them. Glorith travels to the past, confronting the Legion again, trapping them using the Iron Curtain of Time, and then forcing them to touch the hourglass, de-aging them into infants. Now with the Legion incapacitated, Time Trapper decides to travel to the past. He manipulates the baby Legion of Superheroes into committing a series of crimes for him. Me and Soiti initially thought that this must be some imposter Time Trapper, which does happen later, but no, this is the real Time Trapper committing train robbery with a pack of baby superheroes for some reason. After acquiring the items, he asks them to retrieve. The baby Legion feels wronged when Time Trapper won't grant them the candy he promised them in return for committing the crimes. In retaliation, Element Lad turns his spaceship into a giant peppermint, leaving him stranded and at the mercy of Superboy and Brainiac 5. Truly, a terrifying villain. Also earlier in the comic, he used this same hourglass that he created on Glorith to de-age her into protoplasmic slime. He would eventually be left trapped on the planet thanks to the Legion using his own Iron Curtain of Time against him. He would next appear in Action Comics 385-387 in 1970, and plays a fairly small role in the story. Superman in the story receives a distress signal from the 30th century, and heads there immediately in his time sphere. However, things were not as they seemed, as the journey had severely aged him, and he was now 100,000 years old, something that the time sphere would not normally do. He attempts to travel backwards in time using the time sphere, and then his own speed, which he can use to travel through time to resolve the problem, and was prevented from doing so by Time Trapper's Iron Curtain of Time. Time Trapper plans to leave Superman stranded there, only pushing him further and further into the future in order to torment him. As a result of Superman's journey through time and the various adventures he went on, he gradually developed immunities to all of his weaknesses, effectively making him entirely immortal, unable to escape from the trap that the Time Trapper had set for him. Superman commits himself to simply travelling to the end of time itself, which results in time looping back to the beginning and Superman reliving his entire life back up to the moment he stepped into the time sphere, finding it no longer there. Next up is Superboy Volume 1, Issue 223 from 1977. The Legion are travelling through space when they encounter a dangerous bomb that threatens a large part of the galaxy, when some of the Legion members become encased in a barrier. Superboy tries to escape the barrier by flying through time, but ends up being pulled into a temporal limbo as they are thrust several days into the future by the Time Trapper, who then tells them that the rest of the Legion perished in their mission to stop the bomb without them there to help them. Time Trapper tells them that his computers are capable of seeing infinite different possible futures, and that he had sought out one where he is able to defeat the Legion. They then begin to fight, and the Time Trapper seems to be winning, thanks to an ability that allows all events in his realm to happen simultaneously, essentially forcing them to each fight him one-on-one all at the same time, despite the apparent contradiction in this. Pretty weird ability that they understandably couldn't deal with. With it also being stated that Time Trapper was empowering himself with the cessation of time. However, the Legion discover a very discreet weakness of his, that being a giant hourglass on his waist, like some video game boss. Like, I don't know if you guys have played Shadow of Colossus, but basically that. Or Gomer, that one boss from Zelda with the big eye. Anyway, Superboy punches the hourglass, which rips open a time anomaly, sending them back and transporting Time Trapper to the red kryptonite void that he planned to leave Superboy trapped within during the fight. In All New Collector's Edition C55 from 1978, we would see Superboy, where he decides to travel to the future to visit the Legion. However, things are not as they should be because none of the Legion recognize or remember him. They explain that years ago a great war between all planets had started, and it's only the Legion that stops the entire universe from falling apart. The turning point was a nuclear war that erupted shortly after the time of Superman. Superboy recognizes that things have changed, which must be as a result of something that happened in the past, so him and the Legion decide to travel backwards in time to prevent it, back to the exact moment that the United Nations dissolved. After some investigation, they detect a strange energy radiating from one of the people there, who they then tail. They follow him back to his base of operations, eventually discovering the culprit to be the Time Trapper, with him revealing that he holds weapons powerful enough to restrain any of them. Time Trapper additionally explains that he escaped from their latest efforts to stop him, and now that they are helpless, he will destroy the entire time-space continuum. As he is explaining this, Superboy uses a time sphere to escape. Superboy then teams up with the rest of the Legion in the future, and they use Dreamgirl's power to predict where the Time Trapper will strike from, which ends up being the end of time. They travel to the end of time to face him, with the Time Trapper stating that he has already warped the time stream, and that his plan will be complete, soon taking several of the Legionnaires hostage. After capturing all of them, the Time Trapper reveals that he is a controller, who are basically like the Guardians of the Universe, except even bigger dicks, if that's possible, and that he intends to use the Miracle Machine to rewrite time throughout the galaxy to achieve his goals. The Miracle Machine is essentially a wish-granting device, but as he tries to use it, Superboy and the rest of the Legion combine their collective desires and willpower to overwhelm his wish, which causes the Miracle Machine to fix everything according to their wishes, instead of granting the desires of the Time Trapper. Next is Superfriends Issue 17 and 18 from 1979. In 17, the only thing he really does is tamper with a time machine, sending the Wonder Twins through time. In issue 18, after rescuing the Wonder Twins, a team of heroes decide to go after the Time Trapper himself. They locate the Time Trapper in the time stream, also seeing a number of changes happening throughout history as they do so. They then use hypnosis to travel through time to these events to resolve the changes. No, I don't understand how time traveling via hypnosis works either, but, it just kind of did work. Finding the group of heroes in their unconscious hypnotized state, the Time Trapper attempts to kill or otherwise harm the incapacitated heroes. However, he is thwarted by a monkey. After his crushing defeat, Time Trapper promptly leaves. In Legion of Superheroes Volume 1, issues 280 to 291 from 1981, we would see the Legion defeat a villain known as Reflecto, who they would later find out is actually Superboy. However, even more bizarrely, he has the memories of Ultra Boy. The Legion decides to travel to Superboy's time period to figure out what is going on, and the Time Trapper sees this as an opportunity to strike the Legion when they are weak. Reflecto, who believes he is Ultra Boy, begins testing his powers in the past, finding that he can use his powers simultaneously, like Superboy, as ordinarily Ultra Boy can only use one of these powers at a time. He then attempts to fly to the end of time, which is something that Superboy can easily do, and is prevented from doing so by Time Trapper's Iron Curtain of Time. The Legion starts fighting another villain known as Molecule Master, who reveals that he desires the Miracle Machine, something that Time Trapper is also seeking. This leads the Legion to believe that Time Trapper is behind Molecule Master's appearance. The Legion is being overwhelmed by Molecule Master until they launch a combined attack at him, causing his powers to overload, which results in him exploding and incapacitating the Legion. The only member to survive this is Phantom Girl, who then uses her powers to bring Superboy and Dawnstar to the dimension she can access using her powers. With Time Trapper being seen to gloat that he had finally defeated the Legion, as the incapacitated members are imprisoned. The three remaining members are able to rescue the rest of the Legion, and then turn up to confront Time Trapper, believing that only Dawnstar, Phantom Girl, and Superboy are left. Time Trapper is confident that he can easily defeat them, as they are divided. Time Trapper reveals that he is a time gun capable of consigning anyone struck by it to oblivion, as he attempts to shoot Phantom Girl. However, she turns intangible, dives into the floor, and comes up underneath him, grabbing the time gun and causing Time Trapper to shoot himself, obliterating him as he screams, "Aye!" During Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 10, 1985, we would see that Time Trapper had his powers drained by Darkseid, leaving him powerless to defend against Anti-Monitor's machinations. In Legionnaires 3, issues 1 through 4 from 1986, we finally sealed the real Time Trapper again. Everything from Superboy Volume 1 up to Crisis on Infinite Earths has been the imposter, controller Time Trapper. On top of this, the Time Master from his first appearance is arguably an imposter as well. Yes, this is confusing, I know, but that's kind of Time Trapper's entire motif, as you'll soon see. In this storyline, we see Time Trapper at the end of time meeting with his guest, which is the imposter Time Trapper that I just mentioned. The real Time Trapper is angry with the imposter for making him look bad by getting owned by a monkey and shooting himself with a gun and all those other dumb failures I've explained already. Not the infant train heist though, that was apparently, the real deal. The real Time Trapper then promptly kills the imposter with some wild Fist of the North Star death look technique. Like, the imposter just dies and ceases to exist the moment he sees Time Trapper's face. I will also point out that this was only possible because Time Trapper consciously saved the imposter from Anti-Monitor during the crisis, so he could personally kill him like this. After looking his imposter out of existence, the real Time Trapper then laments to a minion that the controller was a poor imposter, and that he will achieve the victory he desires, that the real story begins now, and that the Legion will see what he is truly capable of. All of this, everything I mentioned from this comic, is explained over only 2 pages as well. Time Trapper begins looking for a weakness in the Legion, ultimately coming to Lightning Lad, who is vulnerable thanks to the trauma he has experienced throughout his life. Time Trapper plans to attack the child of Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl in order to obtain the secrets of the Legion from Lightning Lad. Time Trapper turns over an hourglass, declaring that the game has begun. Time Trapper then sends his immortal henchmen to capture their baby. It is worth noting that Time Trapper is the one who makes these henchmen immortal. Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, and Cosmic Boy attempt to rescue the child, but they are tricked by a decoy carrying a message from the Time Trapper, stating that there are only 4 players in the game, and if anyone else interferes, the child will die. In their attempts to acquire a time cube, Saturn Girl is forced to use her mind powers on Rond Vidar. Using the time cube, they travel to the end of time to confront the Time Trapper, where they meet heavy resistance in the form of his immortal henchmen. As they travel through his fortress, the trio are knocked out through the use of a nerve gas trap and are captured. A henchman also refers to the end of time here as a timeless hell. They escape from their imprisonment and then rescue the baby, only to then realise that Time Trapper never wanted the baby at all, and only wanted Lightning Lad. Time Trapper begins to fight Lightning Lad, who tries his best, but is ultimately put under an incredibly powerful ability of the Time Trappers that forces Lightning Lad to relive his worst moments over and over and over again. This is in an attempt to get Lightning Lad to give up the secrets of the Legion. Time Trapper continues to try and break Lightning Lad, however it does not seem to be working as the hero is too stalwart. Eventually this ends, however, and Lightning Lad finds himself back with Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl, with them believing that they had somehow defeated Time Trapper, although they did not know how. We then see Time Trapper with a now empty hourglass, claiming that this occasion time was on the Legion side, but that it won't always be that way. Time Trapper would next appear in Cosmic Boy issues 3 and 4 from 1987. At the start of issue 3, Cosmic Boy and Night Girl are trapped in the past attempting to get the time sphere working again, with Cosmic Boy saying that he thinks certain events might have been changed in history as Superman doesn't recognise him like he should. After several failed attempts to use the time sphere, Cosmic Boy instead uses his magnetism-based powers to travel through time, which actually does work at first, but then they are suddenly pulled to the end of time. This leads Cosmic Boy to believe that Time Trapper has been tampering with history, and that he brought them there to the end of time. They attempt to fight Time Trapper, but ultimately fail, with Time Trapper saying that they are here at the end of time, the end of everything, proof of his ultimate victory, that everything will be reduced to nothing. He says as evidence of this, he is going to start removing the end of time backwards until it reaches the barren desolation at the beginning, removing the necessity for anything in between. In order to stop him, the two of them must defeat his game within an hour. The game begins with them essentially just fighting off Time Trapper's immortal henchmen. Eventually they reach the Time Trapper's throne room just in time, thanks to Cosmic Boy using his magnetism powers to twist the hourglass, preventing the last grain of sand from falling. Time Trapper just starts laughing as Cosmic Boy and Night Girl retreat in the time sphere. As they are travelling through the time stream, they see a giant Time Trapper there who tells them that they are only travelling safely thanks to his goodwill, and that by his authority they will never travel through time again. Time Trapper places them in their rightful place in time, telling them that the next occasion that a Legion member breaks the time barrier, it will be the last. Next, in Legion of Superheroes Volume 3, issues 37, 38, and 50 in 1987. Time Trapper follows up on his warning from the last comic, laying waste to the Time Institute, which previously withstood Infinite Man, who I will touch on later. The Legion shows up to repair the time beacon at the Institute, knowing that Earth could not survive without them having the ability to time travel. Brainiac 5 tries to come up with a plan for defeating Time Trapper, saying that they should summon the entire Legion, but Polar Boy stops him, saying that he doesn't want to leave the Earth unprotected. From here, they plan to break the Iron Curtain that previously stopped them, using the Daxamite powers of Mon-El. If you're wondering, Daxamites have very similar powers to Kryptonians. As they do this, they travel through time, and we see the Time Trapper, at the end of time, reflecting on his warning to Cosmic Boy that the Legion not time travel again, or it would doom all of time, which is exactly what the Legion has just done. And now, all he needs to do is sit there and wait for his eternal victory. However, this is not rewarding enough for the Time Trapper, and so he sets a great game in motion that has taken a long time to be concluded. The Legion begin to see disruptions as they travel through the time stream, which ends up leading them to the past, where they encounter a seemingly hostile Superboy. Superboy uses a time stasis ray to trap some of the Legion, and the rest decide to leave back into the time stream. Superboy then decides to follow them and track them down. When we next see Time Trapper, he explains to us that following the Crisis on Infinite Earths, he observed a Superman that had never been Superboy, and that the Legion hadn't realised this either. In the seconds it took the Legion to travel through time, there were billions of years to act for the Time Trapper, and as they did so, he took a tiny sliver of time, so slender that it could not be measured, a sliver of time that contained an entire universe. He then uses this universe to create his own Superboy within it, which he directed the Legion to when they tried to time travel. During the crisis, all realities were threatened, including his own. However, it also opened up the opportunity for Time Trapper to turn Superboy to his side. The Legion are ultimately able to reason with Superboy, convincing him to join them as they travel to fight Time Trapper, after they free the heroes that were previously trapped by Superboy. It was revealed that during the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Superboy had been struggling hard to protect his universe from the antimatter attacks, when he was approached by the Time Trapper, who says he will spare Superboy's world if he joins him, which was why he had been on Time Trapper's side at all. Time Trapper again tells us that the Legion were only able to travel through time on all of those occasions because he allowed it, and that the Legion never understood him, that the time stream is his domain. Every time they had travelled through his realm, the time stream, it was his hand that guided them to their correct destination through all of the possibilities. What Time Trapper did not know is that Superboy had turned against him, so when Superboy arrives before the Legion, Time Trapper unwittingly offers him a gun capable of killing the frozen Legionnaires Superboy had caught prior. However, with his now shifted allegiances, Superboy denies him as the Legion arrives, throwing the gun at Time Trapper, who simply turns intangible, avoiding it. Time Trapper tells the Legion it is pointless to attempt to face him, that he is entropy incarnate, the end of everything, and that even if they had an army it would make no difference as he cannot be defeated. During the fighting, Superboy accidentally destroys the machine installed by Time Trapper that was halting the antimatter spreading into Superboy's universe, allowing it to continue. Time Trapper is nonplussed, however, saying that this was not exactly his plan, but that it plays into what he wants anyway, and that it sparks the end of time, and that all alternate realities will collapse upon each other. Brainiac 5 is shocked that none of his technology was able to detect any of the meddling that Time Trapper had been doing throughout the time stream in order to achieve this. In a last-ditch attempt, Superboy sacrifices himself by plugging his body into the broken machine, using it as a conduit to absorb all of the antimatter energy. Superboy then uses the last of his strength to take the Legion back to the 30th century, after which he dies. As they are mourning, Polar Boy ponders on whether it is possible to even kill the immortal Time Trapper. We get another description at the end of time, which states that here all things have ended, even those that never began, and that dreams have crumbled to dust, and that lives have faded to memory. In all the universe, it seems to be the only place that remains. It swirls the fragments of the past and abandons hope of the future. All who have glimpsed this nightmare have shuddered if logic wars over faith over the nature of the beginning, so too must it over the ending, and that logic decrees that all things must begin and must end. This is Time Trapper's destiny, and it is fulfilled. Sometime later, we would see the Legion preparing to travel to the end of time to take on the Time Trapper. However, they are worried as they realise that Time Trapper could simply kill them in the past if he wanted to. At the same time, we see Jackson Rugarth going through a very important change inside of an evolution chamber that will greatly affect the events yet to unfold. They finally do travel through the time stream, repeating the oath they made earlier in Adventure Comics issues 321, and Ron Vidar sneaks aboard the Hypertime Cube to follow them to the end of time, where they again meet the Time Trapper there. Time Trapper tells them that he is entropy incarnate, and as such, they cannot possibly be a threat to him, as he dispatches Mon-El with one attack. Saturn Girl attempts to use her mind hacks against him, which fails. Mon-El gets up stating that he has never wanted to kill anyone before, that he has saved all of his hatred for the Time Trapper. His attempts to fulfill that promise fail, however, as Time Trapper tells him to feel entropy. Reaching for Mon-El is the force that pulls the universe apart atom by atom, sapping its energy and its very existence, that it will turn Mon-El into scattered molecules of organic dust. Ron Vidar reveals himself wielding his father's Green Lantern ring against the Time Trapper. This, however, also fails, with Time Trapper stating that although the green light startled him, it did not hurt him in any way, and promptly defeats Ron Vidar. Time Trapper demands that Brainiac 5 justify his actions. His use of time travel that he knew would spark the Trapper's ire. Time Trapper is unsatisfied with his answer, however, and begins to use his power against Brainiac, going into another one of his long monologues. He claims that as the universe was born in an active creation, so too shall it pass in a moment of destruction, and that he is the promise of its ending. The force that takes each portion of its fading life away particle by particle. Brainiac admits to Time Trapper that he is indeed entropy, and that Time Trapper is the embodiment of the theory that the universe needs an ending, and that causality suggests it must occur, but follows on from this by saying that there is another theory, a theory that suggests a perpetual unending universe that falls back on itself in endless cycles. He then calls upon the Infinite Man, Jackson Rugarth, who states that he is the sum of all that was and all that will be, that he has been at the beginning and the ending again and again and again, calling himself infinite, and the Time Trapper Little One as he towers over him. Time Trapper takes offense to this, responding by saying that he is the end of all things, and who is Infinite Man, a mere mortal, to challenge him, as he similarly grows to dwarf Infinite Man in size. Infinite Man is definitely no slouch. His power is drawn from each moment throughout the eternity of time, and his strength has been directly compared to Darkseid in the past by the White Witch. He is directly responsible for the Crisis on Infinite Errors, which is something we never get to see, but it certainly sounds cool. Infinite Man and Time Trapper have an intense clash, as Time Trapper tells him to feel what true power can do. Infinite Man retorts by saying that he is not bound by the limits of finite time, that he draws his strength from across 1,000,000 millennia of living worlds, whilst the Time Trapper draws his from a single dying moment. Unperturbed, Time Trapper claims to have total control over the end of time, that it is untouchable, unreachable, save by those he desires to reach it. Despite this, Time Trapper begins to lose, however, and a final push from Brainiac 5's force field shunts both of them to the dawn of time, where they presumably fought to an unknown end. Brainiac 5 seems to think that Time Trapper has been destroyed. It cuts again to the end of time, where we see nothing but the empty cloak of the Time Trapper draped over a rock. In Legion of Superheroes Volume 4, issues 4, 13, 50, and 53, from 1990 to 1993, we would see what seems to be the mind of Mon-El, who realizes that multiple people have begun talking within his mind. Worried by this, he goes to Brainiac 5, who scans him, noticing 3 separate brain impulses in his mind, even figuring out that the second of these 3 is somehow the Time Trapper. Moments later, Time Trapper leaves Mon-El's mind and pulls him to the universe that Mon-El was originally born in, claiming to have created him specifically to serve as his perfect vessel, protecting him from his fate against Infinite Man, and that he needs to house his essence within Mon-El's invulnerable body. Mon-El tells Time Trapper that he will have to kill him first before that ever happens, but Time Trapper simply responds, saying that if he must snuff out Mon-El's soul in order to reclaim his body, then that is what he will do. Time Trapper creates a physical body to humour Mon-El's desire for physical combat as he starts to beat on the Daxamite. However, partially due to his weakened state and inexperience with this type of battle, he gets his ass beat by Mon-El, even going so far as to beg for mercy. He tells Mon-El that he is entropy and that he will inevitably rule at the end of time, and that his true purpose in creating Mon-El and the rest of the Legion was to thwart pre-Crisis Mordru, a character I covered in another video. He warped all timelines, creating a timeless teen of valor and a great financier to inspire and achieve this, those being a Superboy and the founder of the Legion. All those journeys through time were simply them acting as puppets on strings to grow and challenge Mordru. He tells Mon-El that if he kills him here in this mock universe, that everything he created or set in motion, including Mon-El himself and the Legion, will cease to exist. Mon-El kills Time Trapper anyway, and everything fades to white. Next we would see the world of Balder and Glorith, who realises that her mind was being invaded by Time Trapper, even going so far as to directly compare it to rape. She decides to arrange a meeting with him where he apologises to her, claiming that it was necessary as the universe is decaying due to his own death. He then says that because of what Mon-El did, Glorith will become the new Time Trapper, replacing him. Time Trapper proves that he is dying and implores Glorith to continue his work and ensure his plans remain the same. She refuses, however, de-aging him and turning him into what is presumably protoplasmic slime, much like he did to another version of her in the past. Glorith then consumes the Time Trapper and his powers, claiming them for her own. Along with these powers, however, Glorith also obtained the Time Trapper's weaknesses and limitations. In her arrogance, she overlooked many things, allowing the Time Trapper to take his powers back and return. Time Trapper tells Glorith that he is now in control, and that he is reclaiming this universe, forcing her to relive this moment of defeat over and over. In Legionnaires 18, Valor 23, and Legion of Superheroes Volume 4 Issue 61 from 1994, we at first observe a scene of Mordru and Glorith wielding Infinite Man's powers against the Legion, which then cuts to an alternate, older version of Cosmic Boy, where he is trapped in the infinite library of all chronal knowledge. He ruminates as he is trapped in the library, deciding he might as well look through this vast storage of chronal knowledge for a way to help the Legion, as he is trapped there anyway. As he does, we see him age and relive his life several times. After learning all of this chronal knowledge, he finds himself at the end of time, where he is confronted by the Time Trapper. They talk for a while, and Time Trapper explains that he was aware of the oncoming crisis of Zero Hour, and whilst viewing this, he decided to use his powers to preserve and protect them, using his powers to split them into two possible time tracks to preserve them forever, saying that the Iron Curtain of Time was his bulwark against Zero Hour, which was its purpose in the first place. He further explains that in his attempt to protect the Legion, his plans became progressively more grandiose and bizarre, citing the Baby Train robbery and his war with Infinite Man. The more he altered time, the worse things became, and that he foresaw that minor powers such as Glorith and Mordru would alter time itself, forcing his defeat at the end of time in Zero Hour. This realization allowed him to regain the former memories of his life before he was Time Trapper, as he reveals his identity to Cosmic Boy, which for now we don't get to see. Following the aftermath of the Legion's battle with Mordru, we see Brainiac 5 say that reality is beginning to unravel, and that the end of time is approaching. He says that the odds of surviving entropy are incalculable. As he says this, the Time Trapper appears, and Phantom Girl comments that Mordru and Glorith spoke of one enemy that could thwart their plan, and that enemy was the Time Trapper. It is then revealed that Time Trapper is actually Cosmic Boy, as a result of his study in the Library of Chronal Knowledge, leading him to becoming the Time Trapper, who then tells them that the only way to buy any survival time for the universe is to unite the two legions together. This unification happens, and then the Time Trapper tells them that he has one final duty to fulfill and that their sacrifice won't be in vain as they vanish from existence. In Zero Hour, also from 1994, a comic I'm sure most of you have read, we see that Time Trapper's prediction of his death was correct, as he is destroyed by Parallax Hell Jordan. However, we also see, as the time stream is recreated, a new Time Trapper is immediately born. Next is New Titans Annual Volume 1, Issue 11 from 1995, Legionnaires Annual Volume 1, 1996, Legionnaires Volume 1, Issues 61 and 64 from 1998, and the Legion of Superheroes Volume 4, Issues 100 and 105, which all tie together. At first, we see the Teen Titans receiving a message from this new Time Trapper. This message says that while Zero Hour was happening, he saw Extant attempting to create an army of his own, observing his petty manipulations of time. Time Trapper created his own army of insurgents programmed to overthrow Extant when the time was right. Since they had succeeded, he would now release his control over their lives. In Legionnaires, we would see that Jenny Ognat is trapped amongst many different centuries within the time stream and is attempting to get back to the 30th century. As she was running through the time stream, she finds herself pulled to a strange location, that being the Vanishing Point, which is the base of operations for the Masters of Time, the Linear Men. While she was there, she witnesses multiple different events in front of her, but is unable to interact with them in any way, and the Linear Men don't seem to notice her. It's at this stage that Time Trapper shows up. He calls the Linear Men fools who monitor time, and that their linear thinking cannot understand the cosmic destiny that Jenny must fulfill. Time Trapper then sends her home. We see some familiar faces being given a tour of the Legion's base, and whilst there, they are taken to the Hall of Fallen Legionnaires. During this tour, Ferrolad sees himself on display in the hall along with several other Legionnaires on the tour with him. Astounded, he announces that they are all Legionnaires. In an attempt to figure out what was going on, they contact Ron Vidal, who asks them if any of them have ever time travelled before, which they all have. He tells them that this is a possible reason for their predicament. After finding this out, they are suddenly pulled into the time stream, where they encounter several different versions of the Legion. Following these encounters, they are again pulled into the time stream, ending up at the end of time, where, as you expect at this point, we see the Time Trapper waiting for them. He describes himself to the Legion as all that was, all that is, all that will, all that could be, and all that might have been. Time Trapper tells them that he has created his own realities from single moments of time, depending on his mood, and that he has done this so many times because he loves being a storyteller, and that this story is about the Legion. He displays to the Legion that he has time hollows which contain infinite alternate realities of the Legionnaires, and that he can call upon any of them as he wishes. After that, they try to fight the Time Trapper and he easily stops them by simply freezing time. Laurie calls him Yoda and asks him to explain what's going on. Time Trapper says he has studied them for a long time, fought them and saved them. He has been both hero and villain to them, and he may even be one of them. Time Trapper has changed their history several times for his own amusement and for the betterment of reality. He has even destroyed reality because of this, and that those gathered are there because they are one of a kind, never duplicated by him. The only reason he is telling them this is because he is lonely as a being unstuck in time. Time Trapper combines the infinite realities of legions into a single one so that they can fight for his entertainment. This doesn't work, however, because they have no interest in fighting each other, so instead, he summons the infinite villains associated with each of the legions to duke it out with them. Laurie, who is watching all of this, decides she can no longer stand idly by, and uses her hero dial to turn into Galaxy Girl. However, she is unable to destroy his invulnerable time field. He does say that if she continues, she will cause serious damage to the infinite realities. Laurie, in a last desperate act, breaks open the time hollow which contains the infinite realities to release all of the legions so they can combat the Time Trapper together. This also fails, and the Time Trapper just easily sends them all back to their original realities. Later, we see the Time Trapper at the end of time, claiming that in his next experiment, he will be preparing the Legion to save existence itself. At another point in time, the Legion are attempting to combat the Dark Circle. During this war, they would attempt to use anomaly space. However, this would cause anomaly space to shatter and the time stream to freeze over. While time is frozen, we see that Laurie is unaffected. She tries to use the hero dial, which fails, and then the Time Trapper shows up again. Time Trapper reveals to Laurie that they are in fact the same person, saying that now they just have to wait for the Legion to fulfill the Time Trapper's plan. Brainiac 5.1 appears before the rest of the Legion, explaining that the Time Trapper had engineered events and experiences to train them to deal with the oncoming crisis, and that he was able to do this thanks to his ultimate foresight. The Legion notices that the Time Trapper looks like broken glass, and that he encourages them to get on with it and start a device that will reconstruct time. This works, and everything is seemingly fixed as time becomes unfrozen and the Time Trapper is nowhere to be seen. Time Trapper wouldn't properly appear again for another 10 years in Legion of Three Worlds from 2008. This comic features Superboy Prime heavily, a character I covered recently on the channel. The comic starts and we see Superboy pulled out of the time stream by Time Trapper and whisked to the 30th century after he causes Monarch to explode. During the fighting between Superboy Prime and the Legions, Superman, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad are pulled to the end of time by Time Trapper, who goes on to explain that he has been working backwards through time to erase Superman's existence so that the Legion will never be inspired into existence by him. This didn't work, however, as Superman is too difficult to get rid of, so he instead decides to attempt to kill them at the end of time. Also, the baby train robbery is again referenced. As they are fighting, Time Trapper's fight with Superman begins to reflect Conakem's fight with Superboy Prime, and it is revealed that Time Trapper is in fact Superboy Prime. Time Trapper tells them that he is the sole survivor of creation, and that he has access to every parallel universe and every Legion therein, and that after his victory here, he will kill all of the other Legions too. As they are battling, Saturn Girl is able to contact Brainiac 5, informing him of the situation. Brainiac 5 theorizes that Time Trapper is a sentient timeline rebelling against theirs, and that the reason that his identity changes is because the true timeline marches ever forwards. They plan to use his realm, which connects all alternate timelines, to summon the Legions from other worlds for help. This eventually works, and a large number of Legions from alternate worlds arrive to beat Time Trapper unconscious. They take Time Trapper to the 30th century, where he then clashes with Superboy, causing a paradox that wipes them both out of existence, with Superboy Prime reforming on Prime Earth where he belongs. Next is Legion's Secret Origins issues 5 and 6 from 2012. A politician named Mycroft is seen talking about Robert Branday, the founder of the Legion of Superheroes, and as he finishes talking about it, we see a dark aura surrounding Mycroft as Time Trapper possesses his body, saying that he will eliminate Branday now, preventing the Legion from ever existing. Mycroft, under the control of the Time Trapper, later successfully captures Branday, but Chameleon Boy is able to rescue him. Chameleon Boy tries to apprehend Mycroft, who reveals himself to be Time Trapper. Chameleon Boy finds his shape-shifting powers negated, and Time Trapper goes on to say that there is no hiding from the end of all things, and that he waits at the end of time, and that the Legion will not survive. He has twisted universes to keep their allegiance from forming. Time Trapper goes to finish off Chameleon Boy, only to be whisked away back through time. This is because in travelling to this time period, Time Trapper had inadvertently opened a gateway previously sealed shut by the Legion, and the resulting energy had pulled him back. Time Trapper's last appearance would be in Convergence issue 4 in 2015, where he was pulled from some previous story, presumably Zero Hour, we are never directly told. Pretty much the only thing that happens is that he is captured and absorbed by the Dark Sorcerer Deimos. This would be the final time we would ever see Time Trapper. I hope you all enjoyed the video and like the wild, wacky, convoluted shenanigans that Time Trapper kind of gets involved in. It was pretty complex trying to put this all together just because of the sheer number of different people that Time Trapper has been over his history. I do think he's an interesting character though, particularly as he kind of started out as this gimmicky, goofy villain of the week, and later became this cosmic, abstract entity that represented the end of time. If this video inspired you to buy any comics for whatever reason, please use the affiliate link in the description to support me, or donate to me via PayPal, which will also be linked in the description. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.